My deaf sister drew the same pictures over and over about her daycare teachers, but we dismissed her warnings as behavioral issues. But then people came looking for what she'd hidden, and we were finally forced to confront the truth. My sister Millie was born deaf and autistic, which meant she saw the world differently than everyone else. She developed her own signing system that mixed ASL with these unique gestures only I understood. Looking back, I realized she was trying to save those kids from the very beginning, but nobody believed her. When Millie was 6 and I was 8, she started having meltdowns at dinner. She'd sign frantically in her special language about Dylan and make this gesture she'd never used before that looked like someone taking a picture. Dylan was 16 and volunteered at his grandparents' daycare where Millie went 3 mornings a week. His family was basically royalty in our town. They'd run that daycare and owned multiple stores in town for 20 years, and Dylan was this golden boy headed for special education teaching. My parents were drowning with a new baby and Dad's double shifts, so when Millie started having bathroom accidents again, they figured it was regression from the stress. Dylan's mom explained that Dylan had helped Millie in the bathroom once after an accident. He said he shouldn't have been alone with her, but he was of course respectful, and Millie must have taken it the wrong way. He wrote this long apology about not knowing the rules, and my parents ate it up, but Millie got worse. She started hoarding toilet paper under her bed and sleeping on my floor. She'd lose it if anyone tried to help her change clothes, and absolutely refused to use any bathroom except ours. Her drawings became obsessive with the same images over and over of stick figures in a room with toilets and rectangles that might have been phones or cameras. I was only 8, but I knew something was wrong. I noticed Millie's worst days were Tuesdays and Thursdays, so I started tracking it. Turns out those were early release days when Dylan was actually at the daycare in the mornings, instead of after school like everyone thought. When I told my parents, they said I was jealous of Millie getting extra attention and that she must have a crush on Dylan or something. Then Marcus, another boy at the daycare, started showing the same signs. He had Down syndrome and suddenly developed bathroom anxiety and drew pictures of cameras. His mom yanked him out immediately and called CPS. The investigation went nowhere because most of the kids at the daycare were nonverbal or had communication challenges that made interviews impossible. Dylan volunteered to help translate, which made him look like a saint. Millie completely shut down during her interview and wouldn't even sign to me. 5 years crawled by. Millie learned proper ASL, but still used her unique signs for anything about the daycare. She stayed terrified of public bathrooms despite years of therapy. Dylan went to college for special education and kept volunteering while his grandparents opened a second location. Everyone forgot about the CPS investigation except me. I kept Millie's old drawings hidden in my closet and wondered if I was crazy for still suspecting something. Then Lily happened. She was verbal and told her mom point blank that Dylan takes pictures in the potty room. The police found a hidden camera and raided Dylan's apartment. In his filing cabinet were Millie's old drawings that he'd kept for 5 years. When I told Millie about his arrest, she finally signed the whole story. Dylan had been photographing kids during bathroom help, claiming it was medical documentation their parents had approved. He had a candy reward system for keeping the potty secret. When police cracked his encrypted drives, they found hundreds of images dating back to when Dylan was just 16. Millie and Marcus were there along with dozens of other victims. He'd been selling content on the dark web to buyers who requested specific types of children. During the trial, Millie testified via video link with me interpreting. The prosecutor asked why she never told anyone, and Millie signed, "I did tell." Every day. No one understood. That broke me because she was right. She'd been screaming the truth in the only way she knew how, and we'd failed her. Dylan got 25 years. His family lost their license and faced multiple lawsuits. Millie started mentoring other special needs kids about body safety and developed a visual system for nonverbal children to report abuse. We thought it was over. 6 months after the trial, I got a call that changed everything. It was a man with a deep voice, saying my sister had something that belonged to them, and it better be returned or her childhood trauma would be the least of her worries. I hung up immediately, and my hands were shaking so badly I dropped the phone. I tried to tell myself it was a prank call, but something felt wrong. The voice had been too calm, too specific. He'd used Millie's full name, not her nickname. I didn't tell my parents right away because they'd finally stopped looking exhausted all the time. Instead, I went to Millie's room and sat on her bed while she was drawing. She was working on a picture of butterflies, something her new therapist had suggested. I asked her in sign if anyone had ever given her something to keep at the daycare. She stopped drawing and looked at me with those big brown eyes that always seemed to see more than others realized. Then she signed something I'd never seen before, a complicated gesture that looked like hiding and fear mixed together. Her hands trembled as she made the sign. She went to her closet and pulled out an old shoebox full of rocks and shells from our beach trips. At the bottom, wrapped in a faded friendship bracelet, was a tiny plastic bag with dirt in it. She signed that Timothy made her put something in her backpack one day during the bad bathroom time. She said it was a secret game, and if she told anyone, all the kids would get in trouble. He'd said the police would take their parents away. When she got home that day, she was so scared she buried it by the big oak tree. She'd kept the dirt all these years, thinking maybe it was important. My stomach dropped. I asked her what the thing looked like, and she signed that it was small and black like a toy car, but flat. A USB drive, of course. I grabbed my phone to call the detective who'd handled the case, but it rang before I could dial. Same number as before. The man said I had one chance to make this right. He knew where we lived, where Millie went to therapy on Wednesdays and Fridays, where I worked at the advocacy center on Maple Street. He wanted what Timothy had hidden, and he'd wait exactly 1 week. No police or things would get messy. I told him I didn't know what he was talking about, and he laughed. It was an ugly sound. He said Timothy had insurance, and my sister was the safety deposit box. After he hung up, I sat there trying to think. This had to be connected to the buyers from the dark web stuff. Someone who'd been working with Timothy and was trying to cover their tracks. Maybe someone whose name was on that drive. I looked at Millie, still clutching her shoebox, and knew I had to protect her. But I also knew we needed help. I called my friend Kyle, who worked in IT security. I told him everything and asked what could be on a USB drive that someone would risk threatening us over. He said it could be anything from Bitcoin wallets to client lists to blackmail material. If Timothy was smart, he'd have kept records of everyone he dealt with as insurance. Kyle said to definitely call the police, but I hesitated. The caller had been watching us. He knew our routines. He probably knew I was considering calling for help right now. That night, I barely slept. I kept checking the locks and peeking out windows, looking for unfamiliar cars or shadows that didn't belong. Millie must have sensed something because she came to my room around midnight and curled up on my floor like when she was little. I lay there listening to her breathing and planning what to do. We had to find that USB drive, but but I had no idea where to start looking. The next morning, I called in sick to work and kept Millie home from her programs. My parents were confused, but I told them she wasn't feeling well. After they left, I took Millie to the backyard, and we started searching around the oak tree. The ground was hard and full of roots. We dug little holes everywhere, but found nothing except rocks and old acorns. My hands were raw and dirty. Millie signed that maybe she buried it somewhere else. She'd been so scared that day she couldn't remember clearly. We spent hours going over every spot in the yard where 6-year-old Millie might have thought to hide something. Behind the shed, under the rose bushes, near the fence where she used to play. Nothing. By afternoon, we were filthy and discouraged. I was starting to think maybe the USB had deteriorated or been found by an animal. Then my phone rang again. Different number this time, but I knew it was him. He asked if I'd found his property yet, and I said no. He got quiet for a long moment and then said I wasn't taking this seriously enough. Maybe I needed motivation. He said Millie's Thursday appointment with Dr. Christina was at 3:30, and she always used the bathroom right before leaving. Such a shame if old habits came back. I felt sick. This guy had been watching us for who knows how long. I told him we were looking, but a 5-year-old USB drive buried by a traumatized kid wasn't easy to find. He said I had 6 days left and hung up. I looked at Millie still digging in the dirt and wanted to scream. How were we supposed to find something that might not even exist anymore? That night, I couldn't take it anymore and told my parents everything. Dad's face went dark and Mom started crying. They wanted to call the police immediately, but I explained about the threats. Dad said screw the threats, but Mom understood my fear. She'd seen what Millie went through the first time. We agreed to keep looking for a few more days while being extra careful. The next morning, Dad called in sick too, and we made a grid of the backyard. We borrowed a metal detector from our neighbor Thomas, who was into treasure hunting. He asked what we were looking for, and Dad made up something about Mom's lost wedding ring. We spent all day systematically scanning every inch of dirt. The detector beeped a few times, but it was always just old nails or bottle caps. Millie watched from the porch, signing occasionally when she remembered something. She said Timothy had given her a special bag for the thing, like a sandwich bag but smaller. She remembered it was raining that day because her shoes got muddy. That helped narrow it down to October 5 years ago when we'd had that week of storms, but still nothing. On the third day, I was at my wit's end. We'd torn up half the yard and the neighbors were starting to ask questions. Mrs. Karen from next door brought over lemonade and stayed to chat about what project we were working on. I made up something about installing a sprinkler system while Dad kept digging. My phone had been quiet since that second call, which somehow made it worse. I kept waiting for it to ring. That afternoon, Millie came outside with her old backpack from kindergarten. She'd found it in the basement and wanted to show me something. Inside the small front pocket was a folded piece of paper with a crayon drawing. It showed our house and yard from above like a map. There was an X marked near what looked like the back corner of the yard by the fence. My heart started racing. We rushed to that spot and started digging. About 8 inches down, my shovel hit something hard. Not a rock, but something smooth. I brushed away the dirt and found a small metal tin, like the kind mints come in. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was a USB drive. It was dirty and corroded, but intact. We just stared at it for a minute, this tiny thing that had caused so much trouble. I wanted to plug it in immediately to see what was on it, but Kyle had warned me about that. He said to bring it to him first, so he could check it safely on an isolated system. Old drives could have viruses or tracking software, so I put it in a baggie and we went inside to clean up and figure out our next move. Dad wanted to drive straight to the police station, but I was still scared of what the caller might do. That night, Kyle came over with his laptop and equipment. He worked in our garage while we watched nervously. It took him almost an hour to get the drive working. Water had gotten inside despite the wrapping, but he managed to recover most of the data. When he opened the first folder, his face went pale. He turned the screen toward us, and I understood why someone wanted this so badly. It wasn't just client lists. Timothy had kept detailed records of everyone involved in his operation. Names, addresses, payment records, even photos of some of them. But the worst part was a folder labeled insurance. Inside were conversations and emails between Timothy and someone called Vincent Tate, who'd apparently taught him everything. Vincent had been doing this for years before recruiting Timothy. He had his own collection and connections that made Timothy's look amateur. Kyle copied everything to multiple drives and encrypted them. He said this was way bigger than we thought and we needed to get the FBI involved again. But I was still worried about Millie's safety. The caller had been clear about no police. We decided to wait until morning to figure out a plan. Kyle took one of the copies with him in case something happened to us. Smart thinking, but it made everything feel more real and scary. I barely slept again. Every noise outside made me jump. Around 3 in the morning, I heard a car driving slowly past our house. It might have been nothing, but I peeked out and saw it circle back twice. I woke up Dad and he grabbed his baseball bat and went to check. The car sped off when he stepped outside. We both knew this was getting dangerous. The next morning, my phone rang early. Private number. The voice was different this time, younger and nervous. He said Vincent was getting impatient and I needed to deliver the drive today. He gave me an address at an old warehouse district and said to come alone at noon. No cops, no family, just me and the drive. If I didn't show up, they'd handle things differently. I knew going alone was stupid, but I also knew they'd keep escalating if I didn't do something. I told my parents I was going, but Dad absolutely refused to let me go alone. We argued for an hour until Mom suggested a compromise. I'd go, but they'd follow in their car and park nearby. If I wasn't out in 30 minutes, they'd call 911. It wasn't a great plan, but it was better than nothing. The warehouse district was mostly abandoned, empty buildings with broken windows and weeds growing through the concrete. The address led to a small office building that looked slightly less destroyed than the others. I parked and sat there for a minute, clutching the fake USB drive Kyle had prepared. It had some of the real files, but not the folder about Vincent. Kyle had said it would look legitimate unless they really dug into it. I went inside and the place smelled like mold and cigarettes. There was a guy waiting in what used to be a lobby. Young, maybe mid-20s, wearing a baseball cap pulled low. He looked nervous and kept checking his phone. He asked if I had it and I showed him the drive. He reached for it, but I pulled back and said I wanted to know who Vincent was first. The guy laughed, but it sounded forced. He said Vincent was nobody I needed to worry about as long as I handed over the drive and forgot this ever happened. He said Timothy was an idiot for keeping records, but Vincent just wanted to clean up loose ends. No one else needed to get hurt. The way he said it made me think people had already been hurt. I gave him the drive and he plugged it into a tablet to check. My heart was pounding as he scrolled through files. After a minute, he nodded and put it in his pocket. He said to forget I ever met him and started to leave. But then another man walked in from a back room. Older, maybe 50s, with gray hair and cold eyes. This had to be Vincent. He looked at me like I was something stuck to his shoe. He asked if anyone else had seen the contents and I lied and said no. He studied my face and I tried not to show how scared I was. Then he said Timothy had mentioned making copies and where might those be. I said I didn't know anything about copies. The younger guy looked uncomfortable and kept shifting his weight. Vincent stepped closer and I could smell his cologne, something expensive and sharp. He said I seemed like a smart girl who loved her sister. It would be a shame if Millie had another traumatic experience. The threat was clear. I told him he had what he wanted and to leave us alone. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He said as long as no copies surfaced, we'd never hear from him again. They left first, and I waited 5 minutes before going outside. My legs were shaking so bad I could barely walk. My parents were parked across the street and Dad jumped out when he saw me. I got in their car and broke down crying. We drove straight to the police station. I was done being scared. These people needed to be stopped before they hurt anyone else. The detective from Timothy's case was still working there. Detective Laura Martinez remembered us and listened to everything. She was furious we hadn't come to her sooner, but understood our fear. She said they'd been looking for Vincent for months. Apparently several of Timothy's buyers had mentioned an older supplier, but they'd never had a name or description until now. She took the real USB drive and our statements. She said they'd move fast, but we needed somewhere safe to stay for a few days. My parents' friend owned a cabin about 2 hours away, and we packed quickly. Millie didn't understand why we were leaving, but trusted us. She brought her art supplies and her stuffed elephant. I brought the folder of her old drawings, not sure why, but feeling like I needed them. The cabin was small but cozy. No cell service, which was actually a relief. We spent 3 days there playing board games and trying to pretend everything was normal. Millie actually seemed happy to have us all together without distractions. She drew picture after picture of our family doing regular things like cooking and hiking. It was like she was imagining a life without fear. On the 4th day, Detective Martinez called the landline. They'd arrested Vincent Tate. He'd been running his own operation for over a decade and had recruited Timothy when he was just 15. The USB drive had everything they needed, including financial records linking him to 12 other predators across the country. But the best news was that they'd found his client list and were making arrests. Over 30 people so far, with more to come. Some were prominent members of their communities, just like Timothy's family had been. Teachers, coaches, even a pediatrician. The whole network was falling apart. Detective Martinez said Millie's bravery in burying that drive had saved countless kids. We stayed at the cabin 2 more days until they confirmed Vincent and his associates were all in custody. When we finally went home, there were news vans on our street. The story had broken and everyone wanted to talk to the family of the brave little girl who'd hidden evidence. We declined all interviews. Millie didn't need that attention, and we just wanted to move forward. The younger guy from the warehouse turned out to be Vincent's nephew Samuel. Another family member pulled into the business. He flipped immediately and gave up everything he knew. His testimony helped convict Vincent on federal charges that would keep him locked up for life. During the trial, it came out that Vincent had been abused himself as a child and continued the cycle. Not an excuse, but maybe an explanation. Millie watched some of the news coverage with us, reading the captions since most channels didn't have interpreters. When she saw Vincent's mugshot, she signed, "Bad man gone now," and seemed satisfied. She went back to her drawing and that was that. Kids can be remarkably resilient when they feel safe and believed. The nightmares stopped coming every night. My parents sold our house and we moved to a different town. Fresh start and all that. The Advocacy Center gave me a glowing recommendation, and I found similar work at our new location. Millie started at a new school with an amazing special needs program. She made friends with a girl named Melissa, who was also deaf, and they became inseparable. Slowly, life felt normal again. About 6 months later, we got a letter from Marcus's mom. She thanked us for everything and said Marcus was doing well. He'd started speaking more and was in therapy. She said knowing the truth and seeing justice helped their whole family heal. She included a drawing Marcus had made of a superhero that looked suspiciously like Millie with her dark curls and purple cape. Millie kept mentoring other kids about body safety. The visual system she'd developed was being used in schools across the state. Simple cards with colors and symbols that any child could use to communicate about uncomfortable situations. Red for stop, yellow for uncomfortable, green for safe. Pictures of body parts with proper names. Clear and impossible to misinterpret. The part that still amazes me is how she never seemed bitter about what happened. When I asked her about it once, she signed that bad things happen, but good people help fix them. She said I was her good person who finally understood. That made me cry all over again. She patted my hand and offered me one of her goldfish crackers like when she was little. Detective Martinez stayed in touch and let us know when the last trials wrapped up. In total, 43 people were convicted in connection to the network. The investigation had spread to 6 states and saved hundreds of potential victims. She said it was one of the biggest cases of its kind, and it started with a 6-year-old girl who refused to stop telling her truth, even when no one understood. Vincent got life without parole. His nephew Samuel got 12 years but would probably serve 8 with good behavior. The pediatrician lost his license and got 20 years. The others got various sentences based on their involvement. Some just bought content, others were actively hurting kids. The judge said during Vincent's sentencing that he'd stolen innocence from society's most vulnerable and deserved every day he'd spend in prison. Timothy tried to appeal his sentence, claiming he was a victim too. The court shut that down fast. Being abused didn't give him the right to continue the cycle. His family never recovered financially or socially. They left town and nobody knew where they went.